Comedian, podcaster, and empty shell of a man, Chris D'Elia. He went from being a rising name in comedy to being better known for a massive sexual assault and pedophilia scandal that broke in the summer of 2020.
And I'm praying what I'm hearing isn't true.
Honestly, my first reaction was just like, dude, like, why?
I don't know him. I don't know him like that.
Okay.
So I think we're at a time where everyone's really waking up to the way that we abuse our power.
Devastated and enraged, Whitney Cummings is speaking out about the allegations against Chris D'Elia.
Probably 37 different allegations.
Comedian Chris D'Elia is being sued for child sexual exploitation and child pornography. According to the suit, D'Elia invited an unnamed underage girl into his hotel room in 2014 and then had sex with her. The plaintiff claims she told D'Elia her age, and she said she was in high school at the time. She also says he asked for sexually explicit photos and videos from her.
Saya the fuck Nara, dude.
How would you feel if a 37-year-old man was texting your daughter? Immediately, I was just like, all right, that's pretty fucked up. Like, I don't text children.
If what she's saying is true, I don't think you can come back from that. It's over, bruh.
That's a bad look.
But with that case mysteriously being dropped, Chris would have you believe that he's a family man now, working diligently to get through his sex addiction.
I stand by the fact that all my relationships have been consensual and legal. I've sought out a lot of, medical advice, therapy, and stuff like that. I've been on this path of recovery now for a bunch of months, and I have been doing the work and being somebody who is a role model for my son.
Chris published that video on February 19th, 2021, claiming to be many months clean of his old habits. However, in this documentary, we have exclusive victim testimony that begs to differ.
He put out the apology video. I was so genuinely confused by it because prior to that, everything was back to normal. I wrote him about it. He told me point blank, I don't want anything to change. So we were dating from March of 2020 to April of 2022. Nothing ever changed, even when he posted the apology video.
Wait. So he lied?
You're getting finessed.
These previously untold stories detail not only sexual assault, but also branding, grooming, underage girls, shrimp scampi, and even more.
He told me that when I lived there, he wanted me to essentially find girls for him. The things he said in passing that were supposed to be played off like a joke were he was dead serious about, like his cult, and he legitimately wanted it to be like a cult. Like that was his big dream, was to have his at least a couple of his girls live together, basically have a harem.
It's like something in his eyes changed, and he yelled at me to get on the floor. And I was like, can we just stay on the bed? And he's like, no, get on your knees. And then he snapped and pointed at the floor.
The fellows at the top are likely rapists, but you like mellow out, man, just relax. It's really not that complicated. Well, part of me, I guess I'm just as sane as you explain it. Or maybe sanctifying the sadistic as deranged.
We'll also hear from Chris's former tour manager, willing to come forward in this exclusive interview and tell you about watching everything fall apart from the inside.
When you have someone close to you that is a monster, you don't see it at the time. He wears his mask extremely well. There were over 500 women at that time came out. Women from across everywhere having the same story. And it's the Chris situation is on the Bill Cosby level, in my opinion.
And I can already hear you saying, Kyle, you have to have some sort of proof for these allegations, which I think I legally need to say are allegations. But I do have some proof. You see, Chris went on the record and claimed,
I can certainly say for me, if it's not the blue check mark on Instagram messaging you back, that shit's not me.
So what I would need was if Chris was dumb enough to, create a new Snapchat just to call one of his victims that was talking on Twitter in an attempt at damage control and beg her to delete her allegations. That'd be insane.
I don't give a fuck. I'm just... It's nice to hear you being a person, like I said.
I just don't know what to do from here. Like,
well, we can keep talking if you want. And if you don't mind, deleting that stuff would definitely help me with people sending me death threats and shit.
I don't want to delete everything because it's so infuriating to have people tell you that something you experienced, something you went through, didn't happen.
We can talk about it from now on.
So if we can't trust a single thing Chris D'Elia has told us so far, if we can't trust what he's doing right now, how do we trust what he's done with underage girls?
I first came into contact with Chris D'Elia when I was 17 years old. He got us tickets. We were getting a ton of text messages and Snapchats from Chris in the green room saying, "Where are you? My second set is soon. I need you to come back here. I want you two to suck me off."
But then it got to the point where I actually learned of girls who had been with him from the point that they were underage to adulthood.
The gates of hell, I'm pugnaciously pacing, waiting. I give a fuck if I'm late, tell Satan be patient. But I ain't here for durations, I'm just taking vacations. And tell them fuck them, I never loved them in salutations.
Now in this video I'm going to share 4 victims' stories, as well as speak to Chris's former tour manager and close friend, Zack. Now this is by no means all of the stories I was told by victims during the research of this video. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Pseudonyms will also be used for the victim's protection. Also, any cases that I know to be under active law enforcement investigation, I will not be covering. Now, you may have been led to believe that Chris was canceled, but not in the world of comedy. He still has a massive Patreon, is on a multi-million-dollar tour across the country, and regularly plays the top comedy clubs in LA. Except the Comedy Store, they banned him. I'll let you guess why. But really quick before we get into the meat of the video today, one of the most wild things to me is that Chris maintains all of his relationships have been legal and consensual, and yet has truly never addressed the details of this CNN article. This article lays out 3 allegations: Megan Drust, a hotel worker, and Laura Vitrelli. Megan Drust, a well-respected actress, was the victim of Chris taking out his penis in her car and jerking off to completion while she screamed for him to stop and had to get out of her own car to escape him. The hotel worker was lured to Chris's room after he placed a phony maintenance call saying his AC didn't work, only to be naked once opening the door. This is a well-documented event, as the hotel worker logged a formal complaint at the time, and CNN spoke to staff that was notified and remember this happening. And also Laura Vitrelli, who told CNN that at 19 years old, D'Elia invited her and her friend to a, quote, party after a meet and greet, but upon arriving there was no signs of a party, and Chris was alone watching Cops and eating shrimp scampi. Chris had alcohol for the girls despite them being 19 and him being completely sober. The girls quickly came up with an excuse to leave, but as they did, Chris pulled out his erect penis and chased them out with it. It's just funny to me he's never truly addressed these 3 pretty verified allegations. Anyway, I just wanted to mention those, so why don't we start with the actual subjects for today's video. First, let's go back a decade ago and talk to Chistine. Her and her best friend Kay first came into contact with Chris in 2012.
Me and Kay were watching a lot of stand-up at that time. So it was 2012, Chelsea Peretti, that whole scene or whatever. She tweeted about watching Chris D'Elia stand-up. It was not an attempt to get his attention. We just genuinely were going to shows a lot at that time and watching a lot of stand-up. So Chris D'Elia was name searching himself constantly on Twitter at this time. Slid into her DMs. They were DMing for 2 weeks or so, not that long. So he was playing at Caroline's in New York City, and from Philly you can get on the train real easily and get to New York City in an hour and a half. So he basically invited us to his show. We're on the train over there, and we're drinking on the train because we're 20-year-olds, fully went in there so fucked up that we're fucked up. Do you know what I mean? We meet up with him and he's with his opener. Immediately, he barely says a fucking word to us, and takes Kay, this is up at W, by the way. Yeah, so we walk up, he immediately takes Kay right up to the room, barely says that many words to us. Anyway, he basically left me in the lobby with them, and then they went up and
Kay asked that I exclude the more graphic details of her story, but from what she told me, Chris proceeded to aggressively penetrate Kay against her will in his hotel room. It's worth noting once again that Kay was blackout drunk while Chris D'Elia was, as always, completely sober. That's actually a thing about Chris. He's taken lots of pride in himself that he's never had a drop of alcohol or tried any drug. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, you know, women were his vice. And to that I say, Chris, have a beer. Have a blunt, man. Hit a blunt, you fucking weirdo. Fucking Jesus Christ. Have a fucking Miller Lite. Jesus Christ. Many of the victims that I've spoken to would have been open to having a sexual encounter with Chris D'Elia. In fact, many of the assaults I've been told about started as some sort of consensual hookup, but became unconsensual when Chris wouldn't take no for an answer. The common thread that I get from almost all of these stories isn't a sex addiction, it's a power addiction, a power of controlling other people addiction. Gaining that power is obviously much easier to do with a teenage girl than a grown woman. This next victim is June. June was 17 when D'Elia started grooming her for a meetup in 2016.
I first came into contact with Chris D'Elia when I was 17 years old. I was in high school at the time, so I initially reached out to him through Instagram, and I sent him a DM telling him how much I really enjoyed his special and I really wanted to see him live. And he actually quickly responded with, where are you from? And I told him, Michigan. He said, well, I just did a show there not too long ago, but I can see what I can do. And he then proceeded to ask me for my Snapchat. I noticed a pattern with all the other stories, and he always quickly gives all of these victims his Snapchat, which he ended up having 2 different Snapchats. He gave me both of them. He would Snapchat me a lot of him laying in bed shirtless and all that stuff, and then I kind of got the feeling of, oh, he is definitely interested in me and more than just a fan. Well, I ended up finding out after I showed one of my friends his stand-up that she had also reached out to him, and we didn't even realize this until we were hanging out and we were both Snapchatting somebody back and forth, and eventually she told me, I'm Snapchatting Chris D'Elia, and I said, shut up, because I'm literally doing the same thing.
That's just a numbers thing. If you put 2 high school girls in the same room, statistically they're both texting Chris D'Elia.
My whole Instagram at the time, it was very clear that I was underage. I always kept my age in the bio as well, but there were multiple photos of me in my school bathroom. I mean, at the end of the day, I look very, very young. But nonetheless, he eventually got a Snapchat from both of us showing him that we were with each other, and he didn't take it as, oh, you got caught. He took it as, now let's have more fun. He ended up telling us that he had booked a show in Royal Oak, Michigan. He got us tickets and they were second row to his show, and he quickly noticed us in the crowd. He saw us, and for some reason you can just kind of feel his body language, his eyes trailing to you, and it definitely felt, I kept forgetting I was at a comedy show. I just kept feeling this weird feeling in my gut. After the show, we ended up sitting back and hanging out, seeing what was going to happen, if we were going to hang out with him. At the time, I will admit, we were young, and young girls at my age, like, we do have a little bit of a blame, but at the end of the day, he should never talk to any minors. Security was rushing us to leave. We were explaining to security that we knew Chris, and he wanted us to come backstage, and he just thought we were full of shit and told us we had to go immediately. We walked to our car, and we were getting a ton of text messages and Snapchats from Chris in the green room saying, where are you? My second set is soon. I need you to come back here. I want you two to suck me off, blah, 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 blah. And I kept telling him they weren't letting us back. He said, I can get you back here. And I said, well, we already left. And then he got really, really, really frustrated that we were just, in a way, to him, it was like teasing him. And I'm like, okay, well, we don't want to suck you off, unfortunately. And once we told him that, he immediately blocked both of us on Snapchat and blocked my phone number.
For all those age of consent heads out there, keep in mind that sexting an underage minor is still federally a crime.
If you fuck someone under, well, let's just be conservative, 17. I think that's the lowest it goes in America. And you're your age, then you would call it pedophilia because, well, it's pedophilia. It's like looking at a sandwich and calling it a sandwich.
But not all of Chris's victims were hardcore fans of his.
Okay, so I was not a fan of Chris as a comedian. I never had watched his stand-up. I had never watched any of his podcasts. To me, he was funny half-naked guy on Instagram. And this was in 2019.
Quickly after Jessica had messaged Chris on Instagram, she was given the same Chank Smith Snapchat that many other victims were.
He was doing a show in my location, and he asked me if I wanted to hang out. I met him in the hotel lobby. He was with one of his openers. He only had about 15 minutes before his show, and I can tell that his opener was a little bit nervous upon seeing me that he was going to be late for his show. So we ended up going to his room, talked for a little bit, and then made out for a little bit. And all that was well and good, but it's like something in his eyes changed, and he yelled at me to get on the floor. And I was like, what? I was just very confused because it was kind of a 180. And he was like, get on your knees. And I was like, can we just stay on the bed? And he's like, no, get on your knees. And then he snapped and pointed at the floor.
This continued and escalated in intensity every time she told him no.
The first time he said to get on my knees, I was like, oh, so he's like a dom. I'm just going to politely decline. I was like, no, can we just stay up here? And he's like, get on your knees. And at first I was like, I guess I was just kind of, I mean, this guy's a celebrity. Like, surely, I felt a lot of comfort in thinking that this guy is a celebrity in the Me Too era. Why is he going to want to risk this?
But each time she declined, he got more and more erratic and aggressive and intense until she was literally afraid for her life.
Yeah, well, definitely my heart was pounding. You know, one of those big adrenaline rushes. It looked like I had really, really upset him by saying no. Something about his eyes. He looked evil. I'm not even trying to sound hyperbolic, but he looked deranged. At that point, I just grabbed my hoodie and ran out of there. So I just was thankful to get out of there. Despite that, a few weeks later, he messaged me on Snapchat again, asking me to meet him again. So I don't think he even remembered which one I was. I ended up, on the day of his cancellation, going on Reddit because I wanted to see what other people were saying about it. And it turned out, like, within 5 hours of his cancellation, or, you know, people talking about it on Twitter, there was already a huge support group going. Not just recent victims either. There were victims all the way back from his college days. Through the support groups, I ended up talking to a 17-year-old girl who had been seeing him fairly regularly. And she told me that she mentioned to him once that she had been a fan since she was 14. And he said, oh, why didn't you contact me then? One thing that I noticed, and it was one of the more idiosyncratic things, was a lot of the girls had his name tattooed on them. And I didn't quite understand why until they started talking more about their arrangement with Chris. And apparently he would get girls into this arrangement where they weren't allowed to say no to him. How he would accomplish that was with some form of blackmail, whether that be emotional blackmail, like, I'm going to kill myself if you don't do XYZ, or, you know, I'm going to release your nudes if you don't do XYZ. There's been a couple of victims that I've worried about over the past couple of years, but one that I worried about extremely was a girl who was on the "you're not allowed to say no to me" plan. But by the way, when the Jane Doe lawsuit dropped, that pretty well details the "you can't say no to me" plan. You're not allowed to say no to me plan. Except with Jane Doe, I think he was threatening her with nudes. But this girl that I had been talking to, she was absolutely terrified. She had to share her location with Chris at all times, which a lot of the girls did. A lot of the girls had to share their location.
Many of the victims I spoke to can confirm that he would always force them to have their locations on, just constantly monitoring where they all are, like he's a horny Batman.
Beautiful.
But she said that she wasn't allowed to leave her place without Chris's consent, and that when he came over, it didn't matter if she was in the mood or if she wasn't in the mood. She had to do whatever he wanted to do. I could tell by her voice that she was just absolutely miserable and scared. And so, yeah, she's definitely one that I've worried about pretty much every day since I spoke to her. There were a lot of girls that just did everything he told them to do because they were afraid of the consequences if they didn't. And a few of those girls ended up getting his name or initials tattooed onto themselves.
One such girl is a victim that goes by the name of Jazzmyn. She was deep within the supposed Chris D'Elia sex cult, and even has the branding to prove it.
Yeah, so he mentioned it, like I said, a few weeks into talking. I think we were just talking about tattoos, but he brought it up how he wants to be able to approve, like, all of my tattoos, like, that he would pick because it wasn't my body, it was his. And he would, use the term ownership quite often.
Chris sent Jazzmyn a picture of the tattoo, which she was to recreate exactly, except on her own neck.
And I don't know who the girl was, but it was some girl with braids, and he circled the exact spot on my neck where it was to go. He wanted to truly own, or feel like he owned, his curls. About 2 months after he first mentioned it, I'd say, that I got the tattoo, which at the time he told me he'd pay for, and he didn't. I ended up having to pay for it myself, and it was like the last of my money, literally, so I ended up having to walk until I could afford the Uber to get back to my Airbnb.
So big allegedly here, but you heard that right. Chris D'Elia is such a cheap fuck, he made one of his cult members pay for her own tattoo and Uber to get branded.
I wasn't in LA at that point. I had flown out of Santa Ana because I was supposed to meet with another one of his girls that he wanted me to live with, and last minute she bailed. That was his big dream, was to have at least a couple of his girls live together, basically have a harem.
So Chris is working on having girls from all around the country move into a fuck house for him while he's peddling this false narrative of self-redemption. Keep in mind, this all takes place after the apology video has been out for months. Jazzmyn and Chris were dating up until April of this year. And it's no secret that D'Elia would make jokes about being a cult leader or starting a cult on his podcast, but surely those are just jokes, right?
A lot of the time he would joke about things on his podcast or frame it as a joke, and he was dead serious about his cult, and he legitimately wanted it to be like a cult. Like, he wanted to have us living together, and I'm using air quotes, serving him and worshiping him, and it seemed like such a fantasy-driven thing at the time because it was very hypothetical, like, it would be so lovely to have his girls living together, one to suck him, one to feed him, one to clean him, that type of thing, so that everybody kind of had a job that serviced him. And so it stayed fantasy for a while until he started to really push me living with one of his girls so that he could come over and do as he pleased with either of us. I think it was just a step closer to this really, really legitimate idea of having a cult. And I think that's how he felt, like he was running his own little sex cult.
Are you looking to join Scientology in 10 years?
I'm looking to create one.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a cult, man, for real. Because I'm not in the podcast business.
Yeah, you are.
I have a cult, and it's a cult, and
Chris,
and I am, and I am,
can't
and we
admit
are.
to that.
And
That
we are-
picture looks like a cult
It
leader.
does, doesn't it, dude? I admit I pissed on 14-year-olds brown. That's it. Credits. I admit I had a sex cult. Brown. That's it. By the way, I don't think that's that bad. I'm trying to get one. Now, every time I go out and I do another city, there are more and more babies there. And this is the time to push it further than ever, to get these people part of the cult. If you can get like that, that's ultimate enlightenment, and that's why this is a fucking cult. I don't do a podcast. I have a cult. That's what it is. I want true believers of the hedonistic lifestyle. And I want people who are going to help spread the word and build this cult.
You're a cult
extra
leader.
shit. I'm a cult leader.
You're babies.
Right? Yeah, exactly. This is how we test the cult. They know if fucking daddy's coming to town, you go to the shows, bro. And I told them this is a cult, and they all cheered. Yeah, bro.
Join our cult, baby.
Damn, Chris has cult merch? Fuck, man, women aren't the only shit he's branding. And I get that it's a fun, silly goose time with the whole he's our cult leader, we're followers thing. Like, I get that that's the bit. But once you're like, supposedly, again, tattooing your initials on people's bodies and having them all move into harem houses, like the joke's over.
The more time passed and the more things that he said to me, I realized it was 100% true. That these weren't jokes. It was just him testing the waters to see how people would react, and putting it out there to ideally get people on board. So 100% it was a cult or an attempt at a cult. And I don't think that's changed. I think that's still his view. I think he has a lot of issues with power and obtaining power, and I think through this complicit group of girls that he has, he is getting a taste of that.
And Chris would wield that power in strange and demeaning ways.
He would, out of nowhere, didn't matter where I was, he would just say, on your knees. If I didn't do it right away, like, he would freak out. So I would try to find, like, a bathroom to go into or somewhere really quick. And then, like, when you were on your knees, he'd have you send videos doing whatever he told you to do. There were times I was literally on my knees for hours.
Now, some of you are probably asking why. Why is she going along with all of this? But really, that is a question of control. Manipulation comes in many forms, and master manipulators know the right tool for the right job. So instead of using blackmail or the threat of leaking nudes, for instance, this manipulation came in the form of a threat of suicide.
Again, I'm the type of person, I don't want to see someone do that. I want to see justice, yes, but I don't want to see something. I don't root for something bad to happen to somebody. So he knew that and took advantage of that. And he all the time would pull comments like this, again, alluded to suicide. And so he knew it worked, and so he'd always resort back to it. He'd mention pills. He'd mention about, he'd bring up pills. That only started kind of near the end, whereas before it was just making comments about how if I contact that girl and something happens, like, to disrupt his family life, that he'll be off this earth.
Jazzmyn went on to explain to me how this dark web of manipulation led to her being on the front lines of the recruitment arm of Chris D'Elia's supposed sex cult.
He told me that, like, when I was actually living there, he would want me to be finding girls often, quote unquote. And so holding this idea of kind of like a hierarchy between the girls, and just the commentary that he would use to refer to their bodies and things he would say, like, again, vulgar, but quote unquote young pussy and teen pussy and all these, like, comments. I started to wonder if I was looking too far into things. I didn't want to assume the worst of him.
This deep within the relationship of manipulation and being fed a constant diet of Chris D'Elia's lies, Jazzmyn was hesitant to believe any of the things that she was reading online until she learned firsthand of underage girls that were in D'Elia's network.
The teen category is common for so many men, like maybe it's not a legitimate issue, until I started to learn of different ages of girls when they had first been exchanging nudes with him and sexting him or having physical encounters with him, and his whole thing is that he loves secrets and anything taboo. Again, just in the language that he would use and in his taste, I started picking up on it. Again, when the cancellation happened, I really didn't want to believe the things that were online, but there were certain ones that I knew, just based on the things that they were saying that Chris had them do, the way he talked, there were things that he had said to me verbatim, and so I recognized immediately the ones that I knew for certain were true. But then it got to the point where I actually learned of girls who had been with him from the point that they were underage to adulthood.
And was that girls that you were talking to and stuff during that? Yeah, that he had you in contact with?
Yeah, personally. One of them was 16 when they first started talking, and they ended up in a long-term relationship.
If you fuck someone under, well, let's just be conservative, 17. I think that's the lowest it goes in America. And you're your age? Then you would call it pedophilia because, well, it's pedophilia. It's like looking at a sandwich and calling it a sandwich.
So I remember even talking to another girl about how we were saying that we're just so scared that he'd have a daughter because the ways he talks about younger girls, and it just made me feel I can't even explain that response. To envision him having a daughter made me physically nauseous, especially because there was the whole daddy thing that went deep too.
This is a good time to bring up the fact that Chris D'Elia has something of a daddy fetish, and even extends to calling listeners of his podcast babies, which, isn't great for the whole pedophilia thing, if I'm being totally honest, dude. But being called daddy is innocent enough. That seems pretty common. Surely Chris couldn't make even that fucking weird, could he?
He would get very angry if you didn't call him daddy. Even at one point, he said to myself and another girl on separate occasions, referring to my dad, he said, "He's not your daddy, I am." And so it made it seem like it was a lot more family oriented than I originally thought. One of the girls had mentioned he wanted to sleep with her sister and sleep with the two of them. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, he's never said that to me. Fast forward a year, and he was trying to legitimately, get me to pass along my mom. He wanted her to come to LA the next time I came. He would, go into detail about, sexual fantasies, involving both of us. But he was dead serious about it. He liked the intermixing of, there being that family aspect.
That's not all. Apparently, D'Elia would also circulate nudes from girls without their consent.
And I came to learn that they weren't aware of him sending their nudes.
Right, so ostensibly he probably sent yours to many people as well.
Yeah, I would imagine.
But this apparently had to escalate too, as he started to demand that these girls recreate each other's nudes.
One of the girlfriends who didn't know he was seeing other people, he would send me her nudes. And again, I thought it was just that she was in the same boat I was, where she was aware it was non-monogamous, but he would send me her nudes and have me copy them.
So he would have these other girls get tattoos like yours, and then send you their pictures and be like, "Oh, they're crazy. Look, they're they want to copy everything you are and have."
He would be like, "She's not well," and make it seem like she was crazy. But it turned out Chris was a puppet master and all of that.
Jazzmyn attempted to save more evidence throughout her abuse. However, D'Elia apparently went to great lengths to make sure none of that was possible.
He calls and said to me that he wants me to go get my phone that I go live on, which is what I was using for TikTok Live, the second phone. So I get the phone, and he said, no, I want you to go to your camera roll. And in there I had all the screenshots, and I was shaking. I was so nervous. Because, like, whenever there'd be something that upset him, it was always comments that alluded to suicide. Then that would just terrify me into submission, basically. So when we were on the video call, I deleted my entire phone and that iCloud account. So I, for like 3 years of my life, have no pictures of my daughter, of myself, of anything, because I just cleared out that entire phone. Yeah, that was the only time he had called me until when we broke up. He called to apologize after I had started posting things on anonymous accounts.
Jazzmyn bravely took to Twitter at a time where no other victims were coming forward. And having just left D'Elia's cult, she was passionately posting some of the details of her story to Twitter. However, a few weeks ago, Chris D'Elia created a new Snapchat account in an attempt to get her to take down her new allegations. These are recordings of that call.
I don't know. I don't get how you can say that you cared about me or any of the other people. That I just don't get it, and I just want to understand.
I don't know. I mean, I thought that, can you show me where you are? I mean, I don't ever want people feeling bad about themselves. Like, you know that, don't you?
I don't feel like I do, because, again, there's so many things that, like, you're saying now, like, oh, I didn't know that was the case, but, like, dude, I cried to you about the same things over and over, and like, you knew what was going on.
Now, you might be saying that those could be old recordings, but in these tapes, they talk about how Chris would obsess over her weight and have her measure herself and weigh herself. And this is mentioned in her posts, so these recordings sort of timestamp themselves.
I just, like, even, like, you say you didn't know about the weight thing, but, like, you did. We talked about it, and then...
I always said you looked good. Right?
Kind of, but I remember asking you, like saying about wanting to, like, be a little thicker or whatever, like, put on weight, and you literally told me that you have thick girls, that you want me dainty, like, and it fucked with me a lot.
I see.
During this call, with good reason, D'Elia is clearly paranoid. Annie's being pretty careful, but Jazzmyn does go on to confront him several times.
Yeah, I lied to you and shit.
I feel like it's more than just lies. Like, that was fucked. Like, you knew what was going on mentally, like, and so many of the things, like, you manufactured yourself, like the situation with, like, I don't get it, because so many times I asked you, like, don't you just want this to be peaceful? Like, don't you just want things to be okay? And you made the situation what it was, and you knew how fucked up both of us were from it.
I mean, I don't know what to say. I hate that it happened that way. I don't give a fuck. I'm just... It's nice to hear you. A person, like I said.
I just don't know what to do from here. Like,
well, we can keep talking if you can. And if you don't mind, deleting that stuff would definitely help me with people sending me death threats and shit.
I want you to understand that, like, I don't want to delete everything, because it's so infuriating to have people tell you that something you experienced, something you went through, didn't happen. And having that conversation with Kristen...
Wait, what? For those of you who don't know, Chistine is Chris's wife. You're telling me Jazzmyn's had a conversation with Chistine where she explained the sex cult, the cheating, the underage girls, all of it, and yet Chistine is ignoring it? Allegedly. Don't sue me, you cowards.
I also wonder how it's possible that he keeps all the stuff on his phone secret. Like, when he called me that time, like, recently, it was from a different Snapchat. So he had the Vinny Drago one that he moved his other girlfriends to in, like, the ones that he was quote-unquote keeping after the cancellation. That's the one he used for quite some time until I told his wife about it. And then that's what he switched over to a new one that I don't know the name of. And then he made a brand new one to call me on because he didn't trust me to have the other one. But he likes to take videos of himself doing things with the girls. And so there's like a video of me, doing stuff in his car that he told me is on his computer at home. His wife is sitting there with all this proof at her hands, at her fingertips, and she just can't seem to get her hands on it. After I spoke with her and gave her all these dates and times that I saw him, like everything that I had, and she still refused to believe a word of it.
But as Jazzmyn was saying in that conversation with Chris, the doubt from Chistine as well as others is something that's actually fueled her to try to get justice more.
And having people like doubting something that I experienced for 2 years, like that was 2 years of my life, and for people to say it didn't happen, that pisses me off. And maybe it's a pride thing, but I feel like for other people who've had similar experiences, it's validating, because that's the only way that I started to feel okay is when I were able to talk about things and open up about things. And
we can talk about it from now on. So it's nice to hear you talk, because I just saw that anger online,
And that never came from, I really meant that when that never came from a place of just despising you and being out to get you. I was upset, and I know how I felt going through all that shit, and I don't want that for other people. And in my experience, anytime you've said things are going to be different, it's not.
This is because Jazzmyn knows that Chris is in an endless cycle of repeating his abuse. Nothing has ever stopped with Chris. It's never even slowed down.
So when he put out the apology video, I was so genuinely confused by it, because prior to that, everything was back to normal. He was just being his regular self, and I wrote him about it. He told me point blank, I don't want anything to change. So we were dating as normal, the way that things had been going since the start, from March of 2020 to April of 2022. Nothing ever changed. Even when he posted the apology video, I remember watching it and being so lost, because I thought at the time, does this mean he is ending things with all his girlfriends? And I wrote him about it, and I asked him, is this enabling to you? Do you want it to be the kind of thing where we back off and, this is where it ends? And he told me point blank, I don't want anything to change. And then when he posted shortly after a photo on Instagram with the caption that read, being faithful rips, he was texting his other girls as he posted that. As a regular consumer, as somebody just looking at his post, I would have believed, okay, this is a man who's changed, and he's just kind of trying to use humor to make light of his errors, but it completely was just bullshit. Every time he posted something that was family-oriented, even, when he was at Disneyland, he was texting his other girlfriends. While he's posting pictures of his fiance in Mickey Mouse ears, he's texting his girlfriend saying, you would look so cute in Mickey Mouse ears.
I think at this point the claims in this video have gotten so intense that I feel like most viewers need something or someone at this point in the story to legitimize much of what has been said to them. Luckily, I was able to get in touch with Chris's former tour manager and friend, Zack Doncovio. Zack could best be described as an East Coast bro with a heart of gold. He was willing to sit down with me and talk a little bit about not only working with Chris, but about being friends with Chris and being in that inner circle.
At that time when I left Live Nation, I started tour managing him. And I guess that's when, I was able to be up close and personal and see these things, right? Basically, you're just a point of contact when you're on the road, logistics and, facilitating everything at the show, whether that be meet and greets, just shit like that. To me, he was one of my best friends.
Now, being this close within Chris's inner circle definitely made Zack hesitant to speak out, but he was one of the first people close to Chris to publicly denounce him on social media.
Once I put everything together and found out the truth, I did this post on social media, like, all right, hopefully this will make people aware if this is where I stand.
How many kids ask you, ask you to party when you do colleges? Have you ever gone to just get a laugh? No, I would never go. I'm fucking 38. I don't even like being in the room with them. I feel creepy. That's just like a lawsuit waiting to happen. It's also not fun.
And if you have someone this close to him speaking up, like, I'm not necessarily speaking up because I had to watch out. Like, I couldn't say anything bad, but I'm like, here, this is it. People will know the truth, right?
I'm sure some of you are wondering what it is exactly that made Zack pull a 180.
Like, the floodgates open, you see all these women come out. There were over 500 women at that time came out, and all the stories are the same. They're all saying the same type of stuff, all the same behaviors. And actually, that first week, I literally told him, yo, bro, I'll take a bullet for you. I got your back. I don't care. Because that's like, I'm, from New York, Long Island, and that's your mentality. Like, you gotta, if your boy's gonna go down, you gotta get his back, right? And I was. And as weeks gone on, the more and more shit you hear, you're like, all right. And then that's when it was like left and right. You saw shit like the line, like catching him in so many lies. So maybe a week or two later, I start getting hit up by this reporter. And I'm like, all right, this is weird. Like, why is she hitting me? You never want to talk to reporters, and if when a disaster's happening, it's like, you just don't.
So for several months, that was the end of it, until the reporter reached out to Zack once again in mid-August. Putting another big allegedly here, because, you're such a coward if you sue me, dog. Fuck it.
The reporter then emails me requesting an urgent comment from me.
The reporter's email laid out the details of Chris sexually assaulting a girl after a show in Boston.
The victim wanted to remain anonymous, right? I knew exactly who the girl was. I remember that whole night vividly.
As Zack looked over the email, all the details and actions in her story lined up.
And the whole story was in that email. Then when I saw that, I'm like, oh my God. This happened. There were no doubts in my mind that something took place in that room that night, his room that night. And then that was my moment, and I was like, you're a fucking monster.
Zack responded to the reporter with all the proof he could to corroborate the girl's story.
I responded in full detail, screenshots I had, all that shit.
When Chris found out that Zack had told the truth to a reporter, he became furious.
I gotta send you that audio message.
You made this way worse. This is now a story. It was nothing, and now it's a story. If they weren't gonna publish anything, now they are.
Let's just say the story should have been published. And when it disappears, what does that normally mean? I am 99.98% sure there was no article because there was a settlement. maybe other settlements as well. So she got justice, hopefully. And if you know, you can consider money justice, you know, we could just leave it at that. Because that reporter did great work and there's a victim involved. So
it's also worth noting that Zack has nothing to gain from speaking in this video. He no longer works in Hollywood or even lives in California, and he hasn't had contact with Chris in 2 years. Zack explained to me that he has his own reasons for coming forward.
It's the victim blaming shit that really boiled me up. It's over 500 girls. Let's say even 20% of those 500 were maybe fibbing a little bit or exaggerating the truth. Then you have 400 that like, hey, you're gonna say all those women are like just making this shit up? Women from like across everywhere having the same story. And he's been able to do what he's done and have no remorse. There's no remorse like when he did that apology video. Like when I cringed when I was watching it, like literally said, you know, I've been flippant with people. And I'm just like, yo, man, you're not flippant. Like, this was predatory. Oh, like looking back, so many red flags. Like some girls walk out of his hotel room but it was like this disgusted look. You know what I'm saying? You know, it happens once, twice, 3 times even, okay. But we're talking hundreds of women. I just remember like after one show, I think we were in like Hollywood, Florida. He's like, hey, can you grab this girl? Oh, she wants to meet me. Okay, cool. And it's after the show. I go grab her. I'm like, all right, come on. And I just bring her. She goes into his dressing room. I then go and close out the show with the venue manager. I come back and she's walking out of the green room and I see her face and this girl looks like she's almost in tears. In my head, I'm thinking, all right, that's weird. You know, Chris, what was that about? Oh, nothing. I'm like, oh, okay. And you kind of like, you just have so many things going on. You don't recollect that, like at the time, you don't think, I don't know, but I'm not thinking one of my close friends is a predator, you know? Fast forward to now, it hasn't stopped. What's gonna happen again? It's gonna happen, like you're gonna have these women talking about their experiences, but then they're gonna get the backlash like, oh, they're lying, oh, this and that. They're gonna find some way to, you know, find, you know, little holes in the story, pick at those, and make these girls not credible. I don't wanna see that again. If I'm able to explain what I've seen and what I've put together after all this time, hopefully people will believe them.
One of the many stories that's simply too long to include in this video, Zack explained to me that he knew one of Chris's victims in person.
She was 19, and he like had her move to LA. It didn't make sense to me at all. And I feel like looking back, you feel so bad because here I am, I'm like, yo, she's not telling the truth. Like he would not say that, but it's true.
So Chris in his 40s moved an 18-year-old girl from New York to LA.
They tell me everything. I'm like, I had no clue about this. This is crazy. And in my head, I'm like, yo, this is kind of like calling them babies. I'm just like, it was weird. And now looking back in retrospect, it was like hiding in plain sight. You know what I'm saying?
It was mostly for D'Elia about control and power, something that's much easier to exert on a teenage girl than a full-grown woman.
It's different when she's 17, when he's fucking commenting on 16-year-old girls that are in high school's Instagram posts. That's an issue. It's not the age difference that I see was the problem. It was the abuse of power that was the problem, and still is the problem. And then say it was a sex addiction, he was cheating on his wife or fiance, who Chistine I love and I think is the sweetest, you know, woman ever. He wears his mask extremely well and fools people. But some people aren't able to see his tactics, what he's done. The Chris situation is on the Bill Cosby level, in my opinion.
But Zack is hopeful that his cooperation in this video might lead to a light at the end of the tunnel.
If I get, 1,000 DMs that you're a piece of shit, how can you do that? If I get 1,000 of those and then I get one that actually, a girl that reaches out, thank you so much, then this was worth it. Zack
even corroborated maybe the biggest loose end of all.
We would watch Cops every single night. They really said Cops, and Strip Scampy's on point too. Wow.
Now, I'll address the elephant in the room. I'm also a stand-up comedian. I'm sure lots of people will say that I'm only making this video because I'm a hater, or I'm trying to advance my career Hannibal style, or because I'm a failed comedian. I'm actually a working comedian, which just means I haven't failed yet. Just give me time. As far as being a hater goes, I don't have a reason to hate Chris, outside of him being a monster. He was never my favorite comedian, but when I'd see him go on stage at the main room of the Comedy Store, he would kill. My problem with Chris arose after things started to come out. I only say this because I often see people say things like, you're only coming after him because you're jealous. I honestly don't have some deep-seated rage or jealousy with handsome male comedians that are more successful than me. Spoiler, there's a lot of them. I mean, great comics like Jeff Dye, Moses Storm, Preacher Lawson, Trevor Wallace, all good-looking, successful dudes that I have nothing but respect for, and I've heard nothing but good things about. I also don't fault any of the people that are currently working with D'Elia because I think they've been gaslit by him too. And making this video is not even about dunking on some chud comic to feel superior. I don't even bother dunking on guys like Shab because truly, what can I say that hasn't already been said ad nauseum in his own comment section?
He's getting destroyed in the comments.
No, I'm making this because I care about comedy and about the authenticity of our community. If we allow shit like this to continue and for predators like this to walk amongst us in our ranks just to protect our bag, I mean, how the fuck can you trust anything we say on stage ever again? Good comedy is built on authenticity, and so should a good comedy community. And as far as this being a move to advance my career, Chris and his friends have a hell of a lot more connections in comedy than I do. I've been in comedy for almost 10 years, and I'm pretty positive that this is only going to lead to less opportunities for me in the future. You might say I'm trying to win favor with the woke SJW side of comedy, but I'm a straight white guy, and I don't even paint my fingernails, okay? They don't want me either. So unless the John Oliver show realizes tomorrow that they really want to buy lunch for another fat guy every day, I don't think making this video is actually going to have positive impacts for my comedy career. Personally, I don't think Chris should be pursuing a career in the spotlight anymore at all. He's proven that time and time again, with power or an audience, he's continually drawn to abuse. Personally, I think he should go work at a Payless or a PF Chang's. Realistically, I shouldn't even be making this. I'm not a journalist. I honestly have trouble even spelling the word. I don't know where the O goes. I'm an overweight comedian who lives in the Valley and has less than 500 Twitter followers. I shouldn't be the one who has to do it. Also, I don't want to do this. You think I want to interview sexual assault victims? I mean, they're nice women, but fuck, dude, it's a bummer, dog. You think I want to have to edit a bunch of videos of Chris D'Elia after hearing all this crazy shit? No, I don't want to work on this project. This sucks. I want to go play Pokemon and do mushrooms in the woods. This is truly an awful creative experience, but I think this video is important, and I think it's the right thing to do, so I'm making it, because someone should. When you've been a demon for a decade, I don't think you get to whip it all into shape with 8 months of fake therapy after using and continuing to use our art form to map a juggalo tour of sexual assaults across North America. Really closing the hour-long rape video on a juggalo joke, huh?
You ever see a fucking 14-year-old? She looks 30. I've never seen, there's no such thing as a 14-year-old girl anymore. They go from like 6 to 25. Those days are long gone. They go from 6 to 25.
I'm a sicko.
They go from 6 to 25.
I'm bad.
They go from 6 to 25.
I'm a sicko.
They go from 6 to 25.
Was I the bad guy the whole time?
And this needed to happen because I wouldn't have stopped cheating. I wouldn't have stopped using sex, I wouldn't have stopped.